vast majority of this is absolutely worthless, and it creates the illusion that the incumbency can steamroll everybody. And that's actually worse. What Fulmick is doing is actually really important because he's going after the foundation. He's going after the assumptions that gave rise to situations of emergency and all those sorts of things. And that's really important and critical work. What has yet to happen, and what I call for every single day and what I work on every single day, is we still need the criminal case. And the criminal case is the reason why the dossier was put together. So back to the dossier, the reason why it was there was I had 7 AGs across the country and several U.S. attorneys who said they could not provision the investigation. In other words, they have to appeal to the DOJ. They have to go to the DOJ and say, we need a budget to do the investigation. And if they don't get the budget, they can't allocate resources. That law enforcement should just follow the crime. They have to go and get their investigations approved. They have to go get subpoenas. They have to go get search warrants. They have to go get all this stuff. And these AGs and U.S. attorneys said, bring me the head of John the Baptist, right? Bring me the head of Anthony Fauci.
Let me point out that I've just created a tiny URL, Martin-dossier.
Yeah.
That leads to your video and to your downloadable PDF and
perfect
stuff. So Martin-dossier.
Yeah, and so the issue, and by the way, Robert, thank you for that. The issue is that what I needed to do was what the DOJ was refusing to fund. I sent my first OIG, the Office of Inspector General, and my first DOJ, the Department of Justice inquiry in April of 2020, asking for a formal investigation. Under the statute, they have a 90-day and 180-day reporting requirement to actually respond to those things. Neither one of those things happened. When I reached out to U.S. attorneys, when I reached out to AGs across the states, what I found was that none of them had budgets. And I'm being very polite. They also had no competency, but they had no budgets to go after this investigation. And so...
Forgive me. Let me make
that's okay.
Let me make a quick point, because you did ask me to interact with you.
Absolutely.
One of the things I'm doing is supporting, there's now a Constitutional Sheriff's Association.
Right.
CSPOA.org. There's also, it turns out, a Constitutional Lawyers Association.
Correct.
And I'm trying to create a Constitutional Pastors and a Constitutional Doctors Association.
Right.
And last but not least, I've just launched the Web 3.0 initiative. And the purpose is to make every county self-sufficient with cybercoin, with dark fiber, and with non-harmful mesh Bluetooth level, which goes 500 meters, okay?
Yep.
What I'm saying to you is I see the day coming when we end federal and state income taxes. We do an automated payment transaction tax, and funding is from the bottom up. And anybody who commits treason in a county can be killed and the body burned, and we don't need the Department of Justice's corrupt permission. So let's go forward with where you want to go next.
Well, so what I think is important, Robert, we've been surrounded. In fact, just today, again, mainstream media has been just handing out this kind of lukewarm oatmeal narrative that, Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates are the most misunderstood, beneficent folks on the planet. And it's amazing what happens when you recite the same mantra over and over and over again, that there's an enormous number of people who get hypnotized into saying, well, there must be something good. It turns out that Anthony Fauci has actually committed crimes, and it's important that, as we saw back in Enron, we didn't have the reform of the securities laws until we actually had the perp walk.
Well, let me throw this in. Let me throw this in, because it supports you. Bill Binney and I have been saying on the record that we have it all. We have every email, we have every text, we have every game chat, which people were using to try and hide stuff. We have every banking transaction, including all of the offshore banks. We also have every corporate supply chain transaction. Now, the
Correct.
problem is NSA has not processed all of that, but it hasn't.
No, absolutely. And we have CDRs, call data records, from everybody who we need to access.
We have it all, truly. And what I'm anticipating, and by the way, the Trump hotel room rates are now $3,000 for $675 room the week of 1 through 7 March. As a professional intelligence officer, I consider that an indicator that President Trump is coming back. And we will see. But the bottom line here is I know that Admiral Rogers weaponized NSA against the deep state in the same way that the deep state weaponized CIA and the FBI against President Trump. And I am convinced in my heart that we are going to see some NSA level disclosures. And I will just tell you what these people fear. They don't fear fines. They don't fear jail, because Eric Holder took jail off the table. What they fear is public disclosure of their crimes. They will be told limb from limb.
That's exactly right.
Vigilante mobs. Now, I'm huge on truth and reconciliation. So let me emphasize, I want them all to make the deal and go into witness protection.
Yeah.
Make the deal or die at the hands of the public. So where do you want to go with this as we start to wrap up? I do want you to talk about tests and nanoparticles.
Yeah, well, I think it's critical that we realize, and so my view is simple. I mean, I always love to be, as you and I have talked about before, I always love to be the humanity I would like to see manifest. And that includes taking accountability and responsibility. You know, it turns out that one of the reasons why at 53, almost 54 years of age, I feel very confident in having the clarity of my voice resounding across every platform is because I don't have to remember what I said. I don't have to remember who I said it to.
This is too cool. When I was at CIA, they created the artificial intelligence staff around me in 1986. One of my first tasks was to think about how the Office of Legislative Affairs could keep track of all of the lies that it had told to Congress.
Yes.
It turns out when you tell the truth, you don't have to keep track.
That's exactly right.
If you tell lies, you do. This was CIA in 1986.
Yeah, well, but that's the point. The point is, how beautiful is it that you and I know that we can have a conversation, and the beautiful thing about this conversation is we don't have to go, oh my God, did we say the wrong thing to that? We didn't. So here's where it goes, and this bridges into our last conversation. The problem that we have is the evidence and the lie are in the same plain sight. We just don't know where to look. And so we've been talking about nanoparticles, okay? We did a report many years ago on self-assembling nanoparticles for the various intelligence agencies around the country. I don't know if you know, Robert, but MCAM for many years has put together things called global technology assessments. These things are reports, which are essentially the phone book of bad actors. And pick the topic. It can be, it can be supercavitation, hypersonic undersea munitions. It can be EMF and EMP disrupting technologies. You name it, we put those together because it is critical for our intelligence and for our trade and commerce and for our resilience, our national resilience strategy. It's critical to know the state of the art. When it comes to nanoparticles, we have been reporting on these things for the last 15 years.
Yeah, no, I was doing smart dust and other things for special operations.
And so the issue here is that if you go into, and this is really important, and the public needs to understand this, if you go into the specifications or the description, so it's the meat of the patent application, you actually can map where the human mind has hypothecated a thing to go. In other words, inside of the greed that fuels people trying to secure patents, they imagine where they might be able to take a thing. Well, what we do is we map that imagination. We use it to profile the actor.
Where can people go for a directory of these phenomenal reports?
Yeah, so I've posted some of the GTAs online, davidmartin.world, and on the YouTube channel, David Martin World, we are posting a lot of that material. at some point, Robert, you and I ought to figure out a way to disseminate a couple of these so
Oh,
that we can
I will
actually.
tell you right now, I will publicize anything you do,
So,
including
so
retroactively. Now,
yeah,
let
I
me
mean,
ask you this. Do you have a BitChute channel?
I don't, but I know you put some stuff up on it. It's been great.
Look, you need to have a BitChute channel because anybody who publishes a YouTube embed is destined to have an empty gray box or a broken link. Anything
Yeah,
that you or I are interested in at YouTube is inevitably going to be censored. Now,
yeah,
the good news, let me just throw in an ad for BitChute. Once you create a channel at BitChute, which should be David Martin, your name, and then whatever else you want, the CEO is a friend of mine. He will back up all your YouTubes with no additional work by you, and then every time you load a YouTube, he will automatically put it into your channel.
yeah.
That
Well,
way,
listen, I'm happy to do that because here's the thing: these things, and you know how important this is. These are issues like you brought up the Nuremberg trial. The persistence of memory, the persistence of evidence is so necessary. We have to be able to look, regardless of what happens a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. We have to know that people of conscience, people of integrity, stood against the tide of darkness. We have to have that message. And this is as much for archival purposes as anything else. So I totally agree with what you're doing with respect to making sure that this information is available. But Robert, the concern I have with the nanoparticle situation is that I think that we're missing something very important. And this is an issue that I'm going to be doing more work on. Do you remember back in 1994, 1995, 1996, when the Department of Defense started having a very large black allocation going into EMF and EMP hardening? And then,
I do, and let me make the point that we've never been serious about EMF hardening
no,
or buffering.
no, you're exactly right. But we poured an enormous amount of money into the illusion of hardening communications infrastructure, C4ISR infrastructure, everything else. My concern is that we actually have a susceptibility now at the human level to be engineering kill switches.
Oh, let
And
me
what's
let me
kill
say,
switch?
I've been getting into. I mean, Tom Bearden and I go back many years, and
Yep,
scalar warfare and gravitobiology, and now bioacoustics.
yep.
There's some really serious stuff about the relationship between biology and electromagnetic
Yeah.
warfare. What's your prescription? I want to move toward a close. What's your prescription, or what's your prognosis for cleaning all of this up?
Well, I think it's really critical from my standpoint that people examine both their own physical infrastructure. I mean, I'm actually doing an enormous amount of analog archival. I'm doing an enormous amount of stuff that an EMP burst will not take out. I'm hardening things, I'm storing things, I'm doing a number of things that are actually outside of susceptible to a burst or a blast. I think that's a very important thing. That it's another topic of conversation. I'm also doing the same thing with my own body. I'm being very specific about this. I do not take into my body something that is not an organic substance. And I'm not interested in any intervention that is anything other than that which I know has been non-intermediated with the infection of particles or nanoparticles. And that is not an absolute thing. It's just a decrease the frequency. There are things that we are being exposed to, aerosolized, environmental and so forth. There's a ton of stuff that is probably still getting into this.
No, I mean, if I were doing it over, I would have a whole house water filter because the chlorine
Absolutely. Absolutely.
in a shower is
Yep.
killing your body.
Yeah. So the issue here is lessen your susceptibility. I don't subscribe to any notion that says that if you're actually, anything other than living on a mountaintop in a copper shielded building, you're probably going to get, the drive-by shooting exposure to certain things. What I do know is we can consciously diminish how much energy, time, and space we allocate to it. So I think it's really about decreasing our reliance on the introduction of interventions. And those come in the form of tests, they come in the form of therapy, they come in the form of all sorts of brands. And you need to be aware that if it gets injected into you, if it gets put on your surface, if anything happens where you are in contact with a thing that is being delivered to you, step away from it.
Well, I want to bring this to a close. This has been really a wonderful, wonderful engagement with you, and certainly we're pointing to David Martin .world. You said
DavidMartin.world on my website and David Martin World on YouTube. And let's make it David Martin World BitChute. Why not?
You really should. Actually, what I do is I have a tiny URL /BitChute-RDS. You could have,
Right.
Martin, and that's memorable for people. David, I really am wondering if the human spirit might not be able to expel nanoparticles. Some people are telling me that the earlier attempts with nanoparticles were actually treated by the human bodies as invasions that were then expelled. Do you have a positive note to end on?
Well, I would say this. My positive note is that as long as you and I have conversations, I have nothing but optimism. The fact of the matter is that what was most frequently done is agencies of darkness seeking to make sure people felt that there is no hope, there is no light, there is no future. And what you and I are doing is actually standing against that tide, and I love that. For me, it's absolutely simple. We can go back to every tradition. Doesn't matter what religion you are, doesn't matter what faith you are, doesn't matter any of those things. What you realize is that by instituting and internalizing fear and responding to fear responses, you are engaged in slow motion suicide. You're killing yourself.
I agree, and
if
I want
you
to end.
can
I need to end
expel,
it. So we end on a note of hope. Why don't you give the public your one sentence closeout message?
You are the organization of the most perfect matter and energy ever assembled, and no intervention, whether it is fear, whether it is terror, whether it's chemistry, whether it's magnetism, whether it's electronics, whether it's anything, nothing can defile what was formed as sacred.
And that is the last word.